we just have this kind of like, we love the human condition and we love watching it in full display. I talk about that all the time. And it's like in these cases that we're watching, it's like the worst of the worst in terms of people at their lowest point. And we want to try to understand why a lot of times. And we are very unfulfilled most of the times in the answers that we get,
Case in point,
and
Koberger.
Koberger, and it's like, it's like we can say that people are trying to cope, but like I have zero interest in looking into Koberger's like the police reports. It's like I don't. Maybe that's because Allie and I have tried some pretty horrible cases in our life, and I have zero interest in reading any of the police reports. I mean, like, there's folks out there that, despite the fact that this guy stood up in a court of law and admitted guilt to all 4 of the homicides, they're still trying to say that the guy's innocent and he was railroaded. I'm like, nah, man. I'm like, he ain't that guy, I'm like, that guy, you know what I mean? And it's like,
there's a few cases like that. And that actually brings me to my next point. I woke up this morning listening to, his name just fell out of my head. Listening to, why is that name not there?
Was it us?
No.
Oh.
I'm just trying to think of his name. It'll come to me in a second. When I'm finished the sentence, it'll go bing. But anyway, he's talking about the Stephen Avery case with a investigative journalist. There's a part 2 to that story that's come out. I think it's on Netflix maybe. And one of the things so they got to the end of the conversation. So this particular journalist he was speaking with didn't necessarily believe that Stephen Avery is guilty or did the crime. And so the next question that was asked was, well, who do you think did the crime? And this brings me to a point that I've been covering a lot on my channel over the years, like long before Karen Reid trial came along. If we think that Stephen Avery was railroaded, and then we go, well, we think this person might have done it, then aren't we just moving the railroad to someone else and doing it by trial by media sort of thing? So how do we avoid doing that as creators? Does that ever sort of become a focus for you guys when you're talking about cases?
I mean, you make a good point. I mean, there hasn't, we've thrown out like possible scenarios in Karen Reid, but never, like obviously Aiden Turtle Boy, he's firmly believes that his investigation and what he has learned points to identify these people did it, and we try, not to take that next step when we obviously don't know who did it. But even in that trial, we tossed around, possible scenarios. But, I think that all creators absolutely have a duty to not just be spreading pure speculation, and their theories, but there's got to be a balance between being able to talk about what someone thinks is a possibility, and not creating an entire bulldozer over somebody. So I don't know. What do you think, babe?
Well, I mean, like, so Karen, like leading up to that, because basically what we do on our channel, if you follow our channel, is because we're both lawyers and because we both are criminal defense attorneys specifically, we read all the documents and we explain to the people that are watching along with us what it means. We translate it and we give our thoughts on it. We talk about whether or not we think it's going to be a successful argument, things of that nature. We talk about the cases that are cited and the precedent that exists out there. And Allie's excellent at, in terms of breaking down, the potential for success in a particular motion, and in ways that she can see that happening, and the likelihood that it won't, and it's because of this. And so we stick to the documents like until trial, and because we always say you can't know anything until trial. Like you can form opinions. We all form opinions, initial opinions on cases based on what we're hearing in the media, based on, like, for instance, in our channel, when we're reading pleadings, you can form an initial opinion, but we're always guarding people against forming a final opinion until the evidence is vetted at trial, because both sides just have theories. Prosecutors weren't there when the crime was committed. The defense wasn't there when the crime was committed. The cops weren't there when the crime was committed. So everybody's putting forth a theory depending on which side it is. And that's all it is. And so you have to listen, you have to wait and listen to the evidence get vetted, and then judge for yourself. I mean, we as the public, when we have a trial that's streamed, we're allowed to pretend to be sitting in that jury box. And we're hearing the evidence, we're seeing the witnesses testify, and we can come to our own conclusions. And at that point, it's fine to come to a final conclusion. So like with Karen Reed, like I just would not say whether or not I thought she was factually innocent or not until after the first trial. And then when I saw the evidence, which for me in Karen's case, it begins and ends with John's injuries or lack thereof. Like, to me, that was the most compelling evidence that his body did not in any way, shape, or form show any indication that he was struck by a 6,000-pound vehicle. Like, if it was his arm would have been mush. His bones would have been broken. It would have been bruised to all hell. And like, you don't have any of that.
Didn't match.
Yeah, right. So for me, everything else beyond that, and on my channel, I was begging for Yannetti and Jackson and then Alessi to try that case exactly how they tried it. Forget all of the, I'm like, because whether or not those folks did something to John in that house, which is a distinct possibility, the fact of the matter is, had they arrested any of those people with the investigation as it was, it would have been the same result that Karen had gotten, because they just didn't have enough evidence against them. And so it would have been the same result. So I'm like, in terms of doing your job and walking Karen out of that courtroom, focus on the powerful aspects of the case, which is that John wasn't hit by the vehicle. Stick with the science. And that's exactly what they did. And they got the result that was needed. So, but, for other cases, like, and I know you're a little tough on me on my Richard Allen side of it, but
absolutely not.
Which is fair.
I was tough on the audience. I was tough on the audience, really.
Yeah, I mean, like,
this was the point. This was the point. In order to be able to say Richard Allen is innocent, you've got to railroad other people and say that they absolutely did it. And I'm seeing it same thing with Koberger. People already had their opinions that one of the victims in the house did it. Yeah. And they're stuck on that. They can't move beyond it now because they already got into that mindset. And now they can't break out of that mindset.
Yeah, which is so bizarre. And
like, and with Bob Allen, and I had the same. Sorry, babe. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say with Allen, I mean, we did what we always do. Like, I became interested in that case initially when, obviously I knew about the case because geographically it's pretty close to where we live. I mean, it's within a couple of hours. And when they made the arrest finally after 5 years, and I'm like, wow, they made an arrest on this case. I can't wait to read the probable cause affidavit. And then they immediately seal it, which is not the norm. Like, like, there has to be extraordinary circumstances under which they seal a probable cause affidavit, because in this country, the way that it's supposed to be is transparency is king. We have to have transparency in the courts because we want to be able to hold our government accountable for what they're doing. We need to know what they're doing. And, in cases of high interest, when they did that, it sent up a red flag with me. I'm like, why are they sealing it? So, and it took months for them to unseal it. And then when they unseal it, I was like, what? There is nothing here that required them to seal this PCA, nothing. And every lawyer that I know said the exact same thing. They were stunned that it had been sealed. And then you get like, and as it progressed, and then you get like the Frank's memo, which blew my mind, mostly because I had never seen a legal pleading like that. And then she's ripping them off the case and she's calling the defense attorneys liars. And it was like, I had just never seen anything like it. And the judge just wasn't giving opinions. Like,
outrageous trampling.
It was outrageous. It was outright. I've never seen anything like it.
I agreed with you guys on a lot of points. I agree that Judge Gull was an a-hole. Yeah. I agreed with a lot of the points that Andrea made about Judge Gull. I didn't especially like Judge Gull's attitude and the way she went about things, but I also was on the fence a little bit about what they were sealing and why they were sealing it, and until it came out, obviously. But like we have here in Australia, everything's sealed, full stop. It starts sealed, it never starts transparent. But in the case where it's children, we have a lot higher bar as far as transparency goes when it's cases involving children. So in that sense, I was actually on the fence about what they were sealing and why they were sealing it, until you guys saw them and came out with your opinions as lawyers about there was no point in sealing it, that none of that information that we were worried would be put out there about the children themselves was in those documents. Until that came about, I was on the fence about it. But I agree with you on that point. I also agree that his mistreatment in jail was appalling. Like, he shouldn't have, if they were going to move him from a jail to a prison to treat him because they had better facilities for the mental health stuff, then they should have treated him better in the prison, not worse. you know, if you're doing it for that reason, then you need to have those things in place so there is better treatment. Otherwise, you're just repeating the problem that the jail had. So,
but going back to your point about, if you start putting out other suspects, is that just railroading people? Well, it's different, obviously, when the defense does it than when creators are just coming up with their own theories. The defense, it's your job to say if the evidence points equally in a completely different direction. But even with, not unlike Bob's position on Reed, even in Richard Allen, Bob's position was often, why are they saying Odinist did it and trying to identify the Odinist, as opposed to somebody who has knows about Odinism or knows about these things. Not that it was a ritual where they were sacrificing the girls, but there was some ritual side of it, of someone who's got this kind of background, or was trying to make it look like it has this kind of background, but not finger pointing a specific direction, just that they're just.
Well, I mean, in the Richard Allen case, though, when you get to the Franks memo, and like I just kept trying to, and for the record, on the Richard Allen case, I never said that I thought that he was factually innocent until after trial. Like leading up to it, I thought he was getting railroaded, but you can railroad a guilty person. You know what I mean? Like, railroading doesn't necessarily meaning that you're railroading an innocent person. If somebody's like rights are being violated, like, just unbelievably, they're getting railroaded, and that person can very well be a guilty person. So that's going into it,
because that reflects back on the Gacy case, doesn't it? Because
it does, it really does. You know, and it's like what they did with Gacy.
Finish what she was thinking, though.
Oh, I thought she did.
That was what I was thinking. Going.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I just want to make sure we weren't talking.
Yell at me anymore?
No, he clicked where I was going with that, but yes.
Yeah, and so, but like with the Franks memo, this 136-page opus that Andy Baldwin drafted up, like, all of the information that they had in that came from the state. Like, none of it was dreamed up by the defense, like sitting in a lab. This wasn't, they didn't plug the case into AI and say, hey, come up with some bullshit theory about Odinist that's crazy. Everything that they had came from the evidence that was presented to them by the state. And, and I'm reading it, and you've got this guy, this Elvis Fields guy, who makes this confession to a cop who I actually talk to in real life all the time, Kevin Murphy. And like, the guy says, look, I spit on one of the girls. Like, the little one was, she was feisty, and, and when at some point he goes back and asks Murphy, he's like, hey, if I spit on one of the girls, if they find my DNA on one of the girls, but I can explain it, am I going to be good? I mean, that's a pretty damning statement. And it's like, I don't know how you can kind of overlook that and pretend like it didn't happen, because this guy was like out of the cop's vehicle. He's walking back to his trailer. This is like a circumstance wherein it wasn't extracted out of him. He just kind of made it on his own accord, walking back to the cop car while the cop's sitting in the car and asks him this question. So I'm like, and it's like,
so it raises a lot of red flags. A lot of this stuff.
He's also a disabled, like, mentally challenged person. So this is where we come back to the railroading. We've just said his name, who we think he is, and what he said. But now we have the audience, and I'm not saying this is you guys, I'm just saying this is the response that the audience has, is now we've got, you know, a suspect that we're going to railroad. And that's where we get caught in, as creators, not as lawyers. Like you've both made some very important distinction here. As lawyers, you understand what it is you're trying to achieve in court and how that applies to the law and what it is you need to do for your client. But as creators, we are influencers, and that influences people. And so when we say something along those lines, it becomes blown all way out of proportion. So one of the things that I felt about the Odinism thing, my daughter married a Druid, and their family practices a modern form of Odinism, and they named my grandson Odin. So I don't have that same feeling about Odinism that you guys do. Like I have,
well, and we all recognize that's not like the Odinism that they were referring to is not the true Odinism. It was a prison twisted
White
sort of
supremacy. Yeah, it was a bastardized version.
Right.
Yeah,
I thought Ali actually described it very well when she said that there's a distinction between the two things that were being presented, like that these people did some type of ritual thing, but it wasn't part of a practice called Odinism. So I felt that the audience got very carried away with that stuff. And so I was presenting challenges all the time with the audience, saying, well, show me a case where Odinism or any kind of ritual sacrifice in any group of, you know, devil worship or whatever you want to call it, has resulted in a murder. Like show me an example, and I'll get on board with it. So
you should check out, I had on and she didn't get to testify at trial, and you know, for various reasons, but mainly Gull. I had on the defense expert in Turkey. You should check out that episode I did with her. I had her on for an interview after the conviction. It's pretty interesting. There's more than you think out there. I know that there's kind of like this overall mentality that there's never been a ritualistic killing in the United States. I think if you, because this is her expertise and she's really wonderful. And it's fascinating.
I'm really a numbers person. I need to see the numbers, you know, like the FBI denies that there is anything that could even be remotely put into that category. They've got occasionally here and there, you know, someone flips out and they happen to be devil worshippers and happen to think that that's what they're doing, but it was never a
right. And I think that's really more of what it is. Yeah,
right.
I think
like,
that's more of what it is.
Like Allie and I were always saying, like, quit saying this was like some kind of actual sacrifice. It's one thing for somebody to think that runes are cool, you know, and they kind of like Vikings, and you know they're kind of into the vibe of you know,
white supremacy, like, freaking
right, their Norse paganism thing that they enjoy, like the concept and the thoughts of it, and Valhalla, and just there's aspects of it that they like, and they like runes. And then that doesn't mean that if they left a rune on one of the girls that it was necessarily a sacrifice at all. It just could have been, you know, it could have been like, oh, well, you know, we did something here, and like maybe this is a way that, you know, I get forgiveness, or whatever the case may be. But it wasn't something that they were making a sacrifice to the gods. You know what I'm saying? So, but to the overall question, I think that the safest way to go about it as a creator is stick to the documents. Because one thing that we've never done on our channel is ever named anybody that wasn't in a court document. So anybody that was like, we were simply reading court documents, and you had it in Karen Reed where 5 people or 6 people in that house were all accused of doing something. And it was the same thing. And it was those parallels in those 2 cases where you saw the 2 most divided, like just divided camps that I've ever seen online in terms of cases that were so vitriolic. And it was because in those 2 cases, you had the motion to dismiss that was filed by David Yannetti, wherein he laid out the defense's theory of the case, and it was pointing the finger at the people in that house. And then you had the defense in Allen file this 136-page Franks motion where they lay out their entire theory of the case, saying it was It was this other group of people who all were doing weird shit. And it's really hard to, it's like, if you kind of look at the things that, in terms of weird things being done and the timing in which they were done, there's a lot of parallels. Like, you know, the one guy who was posting these weird pictures that seemed to mimic the crime scene in Delphi, like within days of the homicides taking place, and no one would have known what it looked like. It's kind of strange. It's kind of strange, you know, and it was like every lawyer that looked at it, including the two that took over for Andy and Brad Rosie when they were kicked off the case, they both came out and said that they thought that Richard Allen was factually innocent as well. So you have, and those guys were handpicked by Gull, you know, like Labredo, the second set of lawyers, the guy who's going to be lead counsel was like literally in front of Gull all the time in her courtroom, because he's the public defender in Allen County. So it was like, and he came out flat out and said it. And defense attorneys are not supposed to come out and say, my client's factually innocent. We saw that issue with that. Bill Thompson brought it up in Koberger because Ann Taylor said it early on that my client's factually innocent. And that kind of thing, that sets the internet like off on fire. You know, because when a lawyer's coming out and saying something that ethically we're not supposed to say, we can say all day.
That was the reason that I asked that question, incidentally, because I didn't feel like that was ethical for her.